It was just another busy afternoon in the city. People rushed past each other, hurrying to their destinations. Cars honked as they tried to navigate the crowded streets, and the noise of everyday life filled the air. Among the chaos, Keanu Reeves, dressed casually in a hoodie and jeans, strolled down the sidewalk, his mind somewhere else. He had just finished a meeting and was looking forward to some quiet time to himself. As he walked, his eyes caught something unusual. On the side of the street, near a parked car, he saw a woman sitting in the driver's seat. The car looked old, and the windows were slightly fogged. The woman was staring out the window, lost in thought, her eyes tired. It was clear that something wasn't right, but what struck Keanu the most was the small bundle she was holding in her arms. An infant. Keanu's heart skipped a beat as he paused in his tracks. He had seen so many faces in the city, but there was something different about this one. It wasn't the usual hurried energy that filled the streets. No, there was a quiet sadness in her eyes, a kind of hopelessness that Keanu knew all too well. He couldn't just ignore it. Something told him that he needed to know more. He took a few steps closer, trying to catch a glimpse of the baby. The woman didn't seem to notice him, still staring out into the distance, her hand gently rocking the infant. She didn't look like she belonged here, in the middle of the bustling city. She looked like someone who had lost their way, someone who was waiting for something. Maybe a miracle, maybe a sign. Keanu stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should he keep walking? Should he approach her? He didn't want to intrude, but at the same time, he couldn't just leave her there. His mind raced, but before he could make a decision, the woman's eyes met his. She didn't smile. She didn't look surprised. She simply looked at him, as though she had known he would see her. And then, just as quickly, her gaze dropped again, as if the weight of the world was too much for her to carry. Keanu's heart went out to her, and without thinking, he took a step forward. He tapped gently on the window, causing the woman to look up again. Her eyes were tired, but this time, there was a hint of curiosity. Keanu gave her a soft smile, trying to offer her some comfort. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle, but his concern obvious. The woman's expression didn't change right away. For a few seconds, she just stared at him, perhaps wondering if he was really asking or if he was just passing by. Finally, she lowered the window slightly, and a cool breeze rushed through. Keanu could see her more clearly now, the lines of worry on her face, the exhaustion in her eyes, and the baby in her arms, who seemed to be sleeping peacefully, unaware of the world around them. "I'm fine," the woman said softly, but Keanu could tell she wasn't. Her voice trembled slightly, like she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. There was a weight to her words that didn't belong in the city. The noise of the streets seemed to fade as Keanu stood there, unsure of what to say next. He could feel the tension in the air, the quiet desperation in her words. This wasn't just a woman with a baby in a car. This was someone who had seen the darkest parts of life, someone who was holding on, not knowing what the next day would bring. Keanu couldn't just walk away. There was something in her eyes that kept him rooted to the spot, something that told him this was a moment he couldn't ignore. The woman took a deep breath, her gaze now focused on Keanu, as if weighing whether to share her story or keep it locked away. She shifted slightly in her seat, making sure the baby was still resting peacefully in her arms. Keanu could tell she had been sitting there for a while. Her clothes were wrinkled, and there was a look of weariness that went beyond physical tiredness. Keanu leaned against the car gently, trying not to intrude too much, but showing that he was there, ready to listen. The woman hesitated for a moment, then spoke, her voice soft, but filled with a quiet strength. "I didn't plan for things to turn out this way," she said, her eyes scanning the street before landing back on him. "I was doing okay for a while. Had a job, a place to stay. Everything seemed fine." Her words hung in the air, and Keanu could sense the pain behind them. There was no bitterness, just a sense of disbelief, as if she couldn't understand how life had shifted so suddenly. She glanced down at her baby again, her hand stroking the small infant's head protectively. But then things just fell apart. She continued, her voice breaking a little. One day, my boss told me they had to let me go. There was no warning, no reason. It just happened. She paused, taking another deep breath, as if to steady herself. Keanu stayed quiet, letting her gather her thoughts. The woman looked out the window again, but this time, her eyes seemed lost in memory rather than the present moment. I tried looking for work, but with a baby, it's hard. People don't take you seriously. And after a while, it wasn't even about finding a job anymore. It was just about surviving, keeping the baby fed and warm. Keanu felt a lump form in his throat as he listened. The weight of her words, the simple truth of her struggles, hit him hard. She wasn't asking for pity, but the reality of her situation was clear. She was doing everything she could, but life seemed to be pushing her further down. Her hands tightened around her baby, her knuckles white, as if she were holding on to the last thread of hope she had left. I didn't know where else to go, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. So I ended up here, in this car. It's not much, but it's a roof. It's better than the streets, at least. But I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and sadness, as if she had come to the end of her strength. Keanu could feel the pain in her words, and yet there was something else too. Resilience, determination, even in the face of everything that had gone wrong. She wasn't giving up. She wasn't asking for help, but Keanu could tell that she needed it more than anything. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the city faded into the background as Keanu took in what she had just shared. He felt an overwhelming urge to do something, anything, to help. But what could he do for a woman who had already been let down by so many? What could he offer that would make a real difference? As if sensing his thoughts, the woman turned her gaze back to him. "I'm not looking for handouts," she said quietly, almost as if reading his mind. "I just want a chance. For my baby, for myself." Keanu nodded slowly, understanding her completely. It wasn't about charity. It was about dignity, about giving someone the opportunity to rebuild their life. And maybe, just maybe, that was something he could help with. Keanu stood there for a moment, the weight of the woman's words hanging in the air between them. He could see the exhaustion on her face, the quiet desperation in her eyes. But there was something else, too, a flicker of hope, just a tiny spark, like she was waiting for something or someone to change the course of her life. Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant to be here, right now, at this very moment. He took a slow step back, his mind racing. What could he do? He wasn't a social worker or a financial expert, but he had something that many people didn't, a bit of extra time and resources that he could share. He wasn't sure what that might look like, but it felt important to try. After a long silence, Keanu finally spoke, his voice calm but filled with genuine concern. "You know, I can't just walk away from this. I can't pretend I didn't hear your story," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "I want to help. I don't know exactly how yet, but I'm willing to try." The woman looked up at him, her brow furrowing slightly, unsure of what to make of his words. Was he serious? Was he just being kind but not really understanding the depth of her situation? Keanu could see the doubt in her eyes, but also something else, curiosity. "I don't know what you're thinking, but I do know one thing," Keanu continued. "You and your baby deserve more than this. No one should have to live like this. I don't care who you are or where you've been, but you matter." The woman blinked in surprise, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't often that someone spoke to her like this, like she was more than just a person in need, but someone who could have a future, who could rebuild. It was almost too much for her to take in. "Are you sure?" she asked softly, her voice a little shaky. "You don't even know me." Keanu smiled gently. "No, I don't. But sometimes, it's not about knowing someone. Sometimes, it's about doing the right thing, even if you don't have all the answers." She shook her head slightly, still trying to make sense of it all. She had been let down so many times before, and it felt almost too good to be true. Could she really trust this man? Could she really believe that someone, especially someone like him, could offer her help without expecting anything in return? "I don't know how to repay you," she whispered, almost as if the thought of receiving help was overwhelming. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on the car's hood, the gesture meant to offer comfort. "You don't have to repay me. You just have to take the opportunity. You've been through so much already. Let me help you get back on your feet, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to give your baby the life they deserve." For the first time, the woman looked at him without hesitation. Her gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, Keanu saw a glimmer of something. Hope. Real hope. It was small, but it was there. And that made everything feel possible. "I don't know what to say," she replied, her voice almost breaking. "I never thought someone like you would care. Not after everything." Keanu's heart ached as he looked at her. "Everyone deserves a chance," he said softly. "And you've already done the hardest part. You've kept your baby safe. You've kept going. That's more than many people could ever do." A silence passed between them. But this time, it was different. It wasn't heavy with doubt or sadness. It was full of possibility. The woman looked at Keanu, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could change. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe this was only the beginning. And as Keanu stood there, feeling that quiet connection between them, he knew that he had made the right decision. He wasn't sure where this journey would take them, but he was willing to find out. He was ready to be there for her, to help her rebuild. After all, sometimes the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact, and this was his chance to make a difference. The woman stared at him, still processing everything he had said. Keanu could see her mind racing, unsure of what to do next. He understood her hesitation. People didn't just give out help without expecting something in return, especially not in the city. He could see the doubt in her eyes, but also a flicker of hope, that same glimmer that had drawn him to her in the first place. "I can't promise that everything will be easy," Keanu said gently, his voice steady and sincere. "But I can promise you that you won't have to do this alone. You and your baby deserve more than just surviving. You deserve to live, to have a chance to build something better. And I can help with that." The woman bit her lip, clearly torn. It wasn't easy to trust someone, especially after everything she had been through. She had learned the hard way that promises often weren't worth much. And yet, something in Keanu's words, in the way he was looking at her, without judgment, without pity, made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, this time was different. "I don't even know where to begin," she said softly, her voice full of uncertainty. "I've been stuck in this mess for so long. I don't know if I can just start over." Keanu smiled gently, his expression warm and understanding. "Starting over doesn't mean you forget everything that's happened. It just means you take a step forward, even if it's a small one. You've already made it this far. That says a lot about you. You're stronger than you think." Her eyes softened as she looked at him, and for the first time, Keanu saw a tiny spark of hope. Maybe she was starting to believe in this possibility too. She had been trapped in her circumstances for so long that it was hard to imagine a different life, one where she didn't have to struggle every single day. But Keanu's presence, his offer of help, seemed to open up a door she hadn't even realized was there. "Okay," she said, her voice still hesitant but filled with a quiet determination. "But what now? What do I do? I can't just leave here without knowing where to go." Keanu thought for a moment, weighing his options. He wasn't sure exactly how to fix everything, but he did know one thing. They had to start somewhere. And right now, that somewhere was with her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, his fingers already moving to dial a number. "I have a few contacts who can help. People who specialize in getting families back on their feet. We'll figure out the next steps together." The woman's eyes widened slightly as she watched him. She had no idea who he knew or what kind of connections he had, but the fact that he was already thinking about the next step, already working on a plan, made her feel like maybe there was a chance for her after all. Keanu spoke for a few moments on the phone, his tone calm and reassuring as he explained the situation. When he hung up, he turned back to her, a confident smile on his face. "They'll help with getting you settled. There's a place you can stay for now, and they'll connect you with job opportunities. I'll make sure everything is arranged, and you don't have to worry about your baby. They've got everything covered." For a moment, the woman was speechless. Her heart raced, a mix of disbelief and gratitude flooding through her. I don't know what to say," she whispered, almost choking on her words. "You're doing so much for us, and I don't even know how to thank you." Keanu looked at her with sincerity. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just doing what anyone should do. What matters is that you get the help you need. You and your baby deserve a future, not just a life of survival." As he spoke, she felt the weight of everything she had carried for so long start to shift, just a little. The burden was still there, but it wasn't as heavy now. It was as if the weight of her world had been lightened, even just for a moment. She could see the path ahead, a path she hadn't imagined before, one that might just lead to something better. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe it. The next few days passed in a blur. For the first time in months, the woman found herself thinking beyond survival. Keanu had kept his promise. He followed through on everything he said. He arranged a place for her to stay, a safe, quiet apartment with enough space for both her and her baby. She hadn't even realized how badly she needed something like this, a small corner of the world that was just hers, a place where she didn't have to worry about whether she would have food for tomorrow or a safe place to sleep. When she arrived at the apartment, she felt a mix of emotions, relief, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The place was simple, but it felt like a fresh start, a chance to rebuild everything she had lost. The walls were freshly painted, and the kitchen was stocked with basic supplies, enough to get her through the first few days. There was even a crib for the baby, something she never thought she'd have again. It was everything she needed, but never imagined he would receive. Keanu had also connected her with a local organization that provided job training for people in her situation. The program offered not just work skills, but also guidance on managing finances and planning for the future. It felt like a lifeline, one that might just pull her out of the dark place she had been in for so long. At first, she struggled with the idea of accepting so much help. It felt overwhelming to take on so much at once, to trust so easily after everything she had been through. But every time she felt doubt creep in, she thought of her baby, of the life she wanted to give him. She couldn't keep living like this. She couldn't let her past define their future. She had to try, for his sake, for her own. The first week was the hardest. She had to adjust to a new routine, to the idea of having a roof over her head without constantly worrying about being kicked out. But slowly, things began to fall into place. She started going to the job training sessions, where she met other people who were in similar situations, people who had also been through tough times, but were now trying to move forward. It wasn't easy, but she felt a sense of camaraderie there, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Keanu continued to check in on her, making sure everything was going smoothly. He would send a text or give her a call just to ask how things were going, to make sure she felt supported. His kindness was constant, and it reminded her that there were still good people in the world, people who cared without expecting anything in return. He didn't just offer her a place to stay. He offered her a chance to rebuild her life, to restore her dignity. As the days passed, she started to feel a sense of stability that she hadn't known in a long time. The fear and uncertainty that had once weighed heavily on her seemed to lift, even if just a little. She had a job interview coming up, and for the first time in months, she felt like she had a real shot at something better. She remembered the first day she had met Keanu, how he had approached her with kindness and without judgment. She remembered the way he had promised to help her, and how, despite her doubts, he had kept his word every step of the way. Slowly but surely, she was starting to see the future that had once seemed impossible. Her baby was happy, healthy, and safe. She no longer had to worry about where they would sleep, about finding food for the next meal. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. She had been given a second chance, and she was determined to make the most of it. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she believed that it was possible to have a future worth looking forward to. As the weeks passed, the woman began to settle into her new life. The small apartment that had once felt so unfamiliar was slowly becoming home. She arranged her things, unpacked what little she had, and began to make the place feel like a sanctuary for herself and her baby. Every day felt like a small victory, a reminder that she was moving forward, even when it seemed impossible. Keanu continued to be there for her, a constant source of support. It wasn't just about providing her with a place to stay. It was about showing her that she mattered, that someone cared enough to help her rebuild. He would check in often, sometimes with just a simple text or a quick phone call, to see how things were going. It wasn't always about offering solutions. Sometimes it was just about listening. And that made all the difference. One afternoon, Keanu invited her out for coffee. It had been a while since they had talked in person, and she welcomed the chance to catch up. When they met at a small cafe near the apartment, he greeted her with the same warm smile he always had, and for the first time, she realized how much her life had changed. There was a sense of normalcy now, a feeling she hadn't had in so long. As they sat down, Keanu asked how things were going with the job training. She smiled, feeling a little embarrassed at how much progress she had made. "It's going better than I expected," she admitted. "At first, I thought I'd be lost, that I wouldn't fit in or be able to keep up. But it's been different. I've learned so much, and I feel like I'm actually getting somewhere." Keanu nodded, his eyes filled with pride. "I knew you could do it. You've got the strength to turn things around. You've already proved that." Her heart swelled with gratitude, but also with something new, hope. She had started to believe in herself again, to think that maybe she wasn't as broken as she had once thought. Maybe there was still time to make something of her life, to create the future she had always dreamed of. "I've got an interview next week," she continued, her voice still a little uncertain. "I'm nervous, but at the same time, I feel ready. I know what I want, and I think I'm finally starting to feel like I deserve it." Keanu's smile grew wider. "You deserve all of it. You've worked so hard to get here, and now it's your time. I believe in you." For the first time in a long while, she realized just how much she had changed. She had gone from feeling lost and hopeless to believing in her own worth. And while it hadn't been easy, she had taken the steps to turn her life around. She had found the strength to stand up, to keep going, even when things felt impossible. The next few days were filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She prepped for the interview, made sure her resume was ready, and practiced what she would say. There was still a small part of her that doubted she would get the job, but she pushed that aside. This was her chance. She had worked for this moment, and she wasn't going to let fear hold her back. When the day of the interview came, she put on the best outfit she had, took a deep breath, and headed out the door with her head held high. It wasn't just about the job. It was about proving to herself that she could do this, that she could create the life she had always wanted. Keanu was there, as always, offering words of encouragement before she left. "You've got this," he said, his voice confident and calm. "Just be yourself. You've already shown them what you're capable of." As she walked into the interview, she realized that, no matter what happened, she had already won. She had found a way to move forward, to believe in herself again, and that, she knew, was the most important victory of all. The days after the interview felt like the longest of her life. She couldn't help but replay every moment, wondering if she had said the right things, if she had made the best impression. Her mind raced with thoughts of what the outcome might be. Each time her phone buzzed, her heart skipped a beat, but the notifications were just reminders of her to-do lists or messages from friends. Nothing about the job. Keanu checked in regularly, always offering reassurance. "You did great," he told her after every call. "I can tell you're ready for this. No matter what happens, you're on the right path." Still, doubt lingered. It wasn't that she didn't believe Keanu. It was just hard to shake the years of uncertainty, the feeling that good things didn't happen to her. Life had always seemed like a series of uphill battles, and now, even with all the progress she had made, it felt like she was standing on the edge of another unknown. What if this was just another dead end? The morning she received the call, she was sitting at her kitchen table, sipping coffee and staring blankly out the window. The baby was napping in the other room, the quiet lull of the apartment almost too peaceful for her restless mind. Then her phone rang. Her heart leaped, and without thinking, she grabbed it. "Hello," she said, her voice a little shaky. "Hi. Is this her name?" The voice on the other end asked, friendly and professional. "Yes, speaking. This is hiring manager's name, from company name. I'm calling to let you know that we were really impressed with your interview, and we'd like to offer you the position." The words took a moment to sink in. She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. The voice on the other end continued talking, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat in her ears. She had done it. She had actually done it. After all the struggles, all the fear, all the uncertainty, she had gotten the job. "Are you still there?" the voice asked, snapping her back to the moment. "Yes, I'm here. I can't believe it. Thank you so much." She felt like she could cry or shout, or maybe both. She had a job. She had a future. It was a new beginning, a real chance to build something for herself and her baby. When the call ended, she sat there for a long moment, holding the phone in her hands, still trying to process what had just happened. She could hardly believe it. She had been so close to giving up, so close to thinking that maybe this life wasn't meant for her, that the struggles would never end. But here she was, with a new opportunity, a chance to show her worth. It was then that the baby stirred in the other room. Her heart swelled with love as she stood up and went to check on him. He was waking up from his nap, rubbing his eyes, and smiling that small, innocent smile that had always brought her comfort. She picked him up and held him close, her heart full of gratitude. "We did it, little one," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We're going to be okay." Later that day, when she met Keanu for their usual check-in, she couldn't wait to tell him the news. His eyes lit up with pride when she shared that she had gotten the job. "I knew you could do it," he said, his voice full of joy for her. "I'm so proud of you." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about the future, about how she would adjust to her new role, how she would manage the challenges ahead. Keanu didn't just offer advice. He listened and encouraged her, reminding her that this was just one step in a much larger journey. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. This wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. She had so much to look forward to now, and she wasn't walking this path alone. There were people who believed in her, who wanted her to succeed. And that made all the difference. Her baby was asleep in her arms, and as she looked out the window, she realized that her life was no longer just about surviving. It was about living. She had the chance to build something beautiful, something worth fighting for, and she was ready. A few months had passed since the day she had gotten the job. Life had taken on a new rhythm, one that felt both overwhelming and empowering. She woke up early every day, balancing her new role with the responsibilities of being a mother. The work was challenging, but it was exactly what she needed. She had always been strong, but now she felt like she was becoming the woman she had always hoped to be, a woman who could stand on her own, provide for her child, and build a future. There were still difficult days, of course. Some nights, after a long day at work, she would sit in the quiet of her apartment, her baby asleep in his crib, and feel the weight of it all. The loneliness would creep in, and she would wonder if she was doing enough, if she was doing it right. But those moments were fleeting. She reminded herself of how far she had come. From living in a car, unsure of where the next meal would come from, to this new life filled with possibility. Keanu had continued to support her, always checking in with encouragement. It wasn't just about what he had done for her. It was about the way he believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. His support had been a constant source of strength, but now, she realized, it was her own belief in herself that had become her greatest asset. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, she sat at the kitchen table with her baby on her lap, smiling as he giggled and reached for the toys in front of him. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for everything she had now: the job, the home, the chance to give her child a stable future. She hadn't gotten here alone, but she had done the hard work to make it happen. Her phone buzzed, and when she looked at the screen, she saw a message from Keanu. It was simple, just a few words. "How are you? Thinking of you." She smiled at the message, feeling a warmth in her chest. Keanu had a way of making everything seem brighter, even on the toughest days. He wasn't just someone who had helped her. He had become a part of her journey, someone who had shown her that she wasn't alone in the world. She typed back a quick reply. "I'm doing great. Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." The reply came almost immediately. "You did it. You're doing amazing. You should be proud of yourself." Her heart swelled as she read those words. It was hard to put into words how much his belief in her had meant, how much it had pushed her to keep going even when everything felt impossible. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. She had created a life she was proud of. And more than that, she had created a future for her baby, a future filled with love, stability, and hope. As the months went on, her confidence grew. She took on more responsibilities at work, finding that she had a natural ability to lead, to inspire others. She had once thought that her circumstances would define her, but now she saw that her determination, her resilience, and her willingness to learn were what truly mattered. She had proven to herself that no matter where she had come from, she could achieve anything she set her mind to. One day, as she was leaving work, she found herself standing at the door, staring out at the busy street outside. For the first time, she didn't feel a sense of dread about the future. Instead, she felt a sense of excitement. She had overcome so much already, and she was ready for whatever came next. Life had thrown its hardest challenges at her, but she had learned to face them head-on. And as she walked down the street toward her apartment, her baby in her arms, she smiled, knowing that she had built something beautiful, something lasting. It wasn't just the job, or the apartment, or the security that mattered. It was the life she had created, and the fact that she had done it with her own hands. No one could take that away from her. She had proven to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. And with that knowledge, she knew she could face whatever came next with strength, courage, and hope.